Good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining the session which concerns consumer behaviors. Well, I was asked to act as sort of a fire starter, somebody who inspires the subsequent discussion and tries to talk to you about new tendencies and maybe some surprising aspects of consumer behavior. So what I will try to talk to you about is really the future consumer as co-creator, co-designer of food, somebody who can also contribute to the product development and establishment of the market. And this will leverage some of experiences of EIT Food funded project. I assume that everyone who is in this room is very much fond of consumers. And of course, it's a truism. Food industry is always saying that consumer is the king and we do everything for consumers. But in fact, when you think about the way how food producers normally work, it's maybe not all that rosy. Let's take the metaphor or analogy of a taxi driver. So a taxi driver has a car, knowledge of the city, of topography, and petrol. In the same way, food producers have knowledge of food technologies, manufacturing lines, ingredients, products that they could produce. But how come, imagine a taxi driver that would be driving the consumer or client all over the town and asking, is this the right place? Is this the right place? This is where you wanted to get? This is exactly what happens in the food industry. When you think about all those processes of designing, developing new products, and then doing acceptance tests, sensory panels only after the whole product development process was finished, this is probably something that is different from the logic of really asking consumers to intervene. And that's exactly the topic of co-creation. Attempts to involve consumers in the process of designing products, not just responding to previous plans of the producers. At University of Warsaw, in EIT Food project, Consumer Engagement Labs, we've developed methodology that was supposed to bring together consumers and producers, design new products, and pave the ways for slightly different way of working with the market. Lithuania is a special place when it comes to consumer engagement labs because this was one of the first two countries where we actually started developing the methodology in 2019. But afterwards, we implemented or rolled this out to 16 countries. We worked with 82 consumer groups, 43 companies, and those co-creation processes where consumers were designing products that are afterwards introduced to the market by companies, those processes were successful in at least 22 cases. So co-creation, the way how we try to understand this, is very different from standard qualitative research that you might know from your everyday practice. So it's not a typical focus group because it's much longer. It's not acceptance test because there is nothing to accept yet. We are rather looking for inspiration and ideas, and it's also not a hackathon, which normally is implemented with the involvement of experts or semi-experts. Here, we try to work with average consumers. We try to focus on a process to really engage people, to ensure that they stay motivated. Teamwork proved to be one of the essential components of this process, something that was keeping people and making them come back for more and more sessions. And finally, when you think about the process in which producers are asking consumers for their wishes, desires, product ideas, it's strongly empowering people, making sure that their voices are really heard and they become the drivers, not the clients. Just some examples. Here you see pictures from one of our first workshops in Kaunas in 2019 with a group of older consumers from the Kaunas area. We were prior to COVID, we were implementing those processes on a face-to-face modalities. Afterwards, we switched to online mode. But in general, the dynamics stayed more or less the same. And really, what we managed to achieve was to generate a substantial number of product ideas, out of which 22 products are already on the market, 6 are in the pipeline, and some packaging designs are also proposed by consumers. And when I try to start discussing the specific needs and expectations of consumers, you might be surprised by wishes, ideas, and expectations that came out of those co-creation workshops, because most of the ideas and proposals were very distant from what product design experts in food companies would expect. So those products were actually matching the needs of consumers, which makes co-creation a very attractive scenario for food companies, because it's potentially very quick commercial win, something that is really desired, trusted, and transparent. But at the same time, our experiences indicated that, well, you can involve consumers in design, but remember that you also need food technologies and experts from your companies to actually work on the refinement of those ideas. And here, just to show you some examples, Lithuanian product brought to the market by Ecofrisa and Iki, Gricola, proposed by Lithuanian older consumers who appreciated the crunchiness and all the sensory impressions of granola, but granola is probably not the healthiest or safest choices for older consumers, because baked cereals are very hard. So potentially they pose danger to the teeth. So instead of cereals, the granola was made out of buckwheat, which was still crunchy but far softer. At the same time, it had lower glycemic index. It also had some additional benefits in terms of reduced sugar content. Another example, Portugal. A group of consumers who also involved people with diabetes were trying to design perfect biscuits, which would not stick to the teeth, which would still be crunchy and low in sugar and fat. Here is the result, Bolachas digestive. Idea from Croatia, from a company called Sidrani. Instant coffee with kombucha. So imagine that it's middle of the summertime and you just bought a small pocket which you open and dilute with a glass of cold water. It's probiotic, it's also iced coffee, and it's extremely lightweight, so you can take many of them on your yacht or whenever you plan to travel. Another example, again from this region, curd, traditional Latvian product, but made with dairy substitute based on fermented pea. And if you look at the texture, if you think about the sensory dimensions, it's really resembling the traditional curd, but it's also suitable for people who might have certain intolerances or allergies. So those were just few examples of products, but I wanted to talk to you more about the actual needs, tendencies, and trends that we could infer from those processes of working with consumers. Because we had the privilege of working with those over 80 groups of consumers in different countries, and there are certain tendencies that we managed to spot throughout those countries and months. And I tried to name those tendencies. On the following slides, I will also briefly describe them. There are basically 4 dominant tendencies that really pop up across different panels and different consumer groups. One, let's call it avoid and enhance. conveniently empowered. The third one, local is cool. And, well, the last one, future was yesterday. Sounds quite scary. So one by one, avoid and enhance. Consumers tend to insist on either elimination of certain ingredients or supplementation of some other ingredients. And it's always around health, nutrition, sometimes also environment. So people ask you to remove or eliminate sugar, reduce the fat contents. I remember the Lithuanian panels were particularly keen on getting rid of all the palm oil in products, which apparently was linked to some preconceived notions, because the day before the panel there was huge broadcast in Lithuanian television where a health expert was explaining that palm oil is not entirely healthy. So consumers really like products that would reduce or supplement some ingredients. At the same time, remember that it doesn't mean that your consumer will be a nutrition expert. Sometimes the knowledge or the understanding of ingredients and food technologies might be slightly skewed. So that's one tendency that every food company probably experiences nowadays. But another one, this is something slightly untypical. We call it conveniently empowered. Consumers look for convenience, right? So they would like to get products that are easier to buy, easier to transport home, easier to open. So for example, single unit sizes are preferable for singles or older consumers or certain types of consumers that would like just to sample something. A lot of problems were linked to disposal of packaging. So again, convenience aspects were popping up throughout all the discussions of food, packaging, and consumption. But at the same time, consumers don't like to be paternalized or treated as if they were children or disabled. So they want convenience, but at the same time, they also want to have the feeling that they've done something. So the feeling of agency, I can do it. So they would like to have a package that opens in far easier ways, but they would also like to be proud of being able to open this package. In the same way, when we talk about ready-to-use meals, in some countries we worked on product ideas where consumers would just get a jar full with the complete meal or dish that they could serve. But still, people would love to have some agency in this process, so that they would, for example, take out the contents of the jar and mix it with something or serve in such a way that they really have the feeling that it's also me, it's also part of my achievement, it's not just something that was served to me. And I think this particular aspect, conveniently empowered, this is slightly different from what many retail companies or also food producers are doing, because they are trying to eliminate every single hassle, every single problem in the consumption process. The third aspect. Prior to COVID, the aspects of local food production were important. In the times of COVID and after the pandemics, the importance of local embeddedness went up. So people are really asking for locally sourced ingredients. It doesn't mean that they don't want to mix them with something exotic, but sometimes they also take some pride in using products that are coming from local producers. And we discovered that a lot of ideas for new products were strongly linked to food traditions of specific region or country, traditional flavors, recipes. So a way of taking pride in food and sort of local patriotism. Again, this is a movement that is probably slightly different from what multinational food producers are doing, and that's exactly the way of boosting the image of local food industry. And finally, Well, future was yesterday. The interesting thing is that when you think about the food of the future, many consumers think about the food of the past. So the food of tomorrow is the food of yesterday, but it's better. It's healthier. It's more sustainable. It's produced in ways that are better for the environment. And that was quite a shock in many countries because people were able to pick up ancient recipes, rediscover some legumes, vegetables that were unknown for years, and you might be surprised by the sources of inspiration that are coming from the past, nostalgia, childhood remembrances, brands or products that people remember because they were consuming them 20 years ago. And finally, when we think about this future was yesterday, there is also one very interesting tendency that we started observing and appreciating in 2019, so long before COVID, long before the horrible war caused by Russia. Frugal innovations, innovations that are modest, high added value, relatively low cost. Many consumers were suggesting us that they don't want bells and whistles, they don't want a type of Instagram food. They want something plain and simple, but still attractive, tasty, nutritious. And a lot of ideas proposed by consumers were relatively easy to implement, were exactly frugal innovations, so less is more. And in 2019, it seemed but not so attractive for many companies that would rather bet on highly exquisite products that could earn high margins. But then came COVID-19, and now in the current economic situation, in the upcoming crisis, people start appreciating products that would be probably more added value or more value for money than expensive and highly exquisite food. So the future was yesterday is probably a way of reliving the past in such way by drawing on the previous experiences, traditions, culture, and designing something new. Those were just 4 tendencies that I was trying to show you. This could be a good starting point for discussions. To those of you who are interested in co-creation, we also invite you to join our online sessions, which, by the way, we are going to hold in 2 days and next week. So that there will be whole trainings and sessions where we explain food companies what to do about this. And you can hopefully find the links online by checking the EIT Food website. So thank you very much for the opportunity to talk to you about those consumer trends, and I understand that